Okay, hi guys. Welcome back to my channel. I have a very special guest with me today, Miss Lynn D. Jung herself in the flesh. Firstly, I sent her the first scene of my book, Project Night, aka Night Word, which I've been working on for like a year now. You're like one of the few people that have like actually read a piece of this draft. She's critiqued some of it, and we're gonna like, you know, chat about the opening scene and just kind of like our thoughts on like, I guess, yeah, how we feel about openings in general. We previously just filmed a video on Lynn's channel where we dug a little bit into her project. So if you're interested in our chat about that, you can check out her video. And I'm a little bit nervous, even though you did tell me you liked it. So, yeah. But I'm still nervous.
Oh, no, it's always nervous to like read those things for the first time, but no, I liked it.
Oh yeah, like just to give like context, I mean, maybe people already know, but the book is an adult fantasy, and it kind of takes place in like a 20th century inspired like Philippine setting. In this scene, one of the main characters shows up to a cabaret, essentially, sort of like a foreigner only cabaret, and she's trying to break in. Oh, you commented on the first sentence. Killer line right off the bat. An absolute slam dunk. Oh my god. Me and my basketball era.
I don't know any sports. I just used a random sport word.
It's a basketball
oh,
thing.
Sweet. Okay, yeah.
Yes. I'm an NBA fan, so.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm 5'2", so I've never thought about basketball.
You're 5'2"? Oh my god. I'm 5'1.5", but I round up. I literally round up to 5'2".
I'm also rounding up.
Are we the same height? That's crazy. You don't seem short in your videos. I'm just gonna say.
I've heard that I have tall energy. I think
you have tall energy.
I think it's because when I was growing up, I was a little older than everyone else, so I was usually taller than like other kids. So I grew up being taller, but I just stopped growing earlier.
You had a comment here. This applies to the entire excerpt, but you utilize sensory imagery so well. It makes for a really lively, vivid read. I'm so glad. I feel like that's something that I've only worked on recently. So it actually means a lot to like have it pointed out.
I think you have a really strong flair for it, because this was just really like the imagery kept jumping out to me in a way I haven't seen in like a really long time in like published books or yeah.
Okay, let me just throw up for a second. I'm like so winded.
Oh no.
In my original drafts, I was like, oh, I feel like my descriptions are like, you know, when you start reading a book and then it's just like, you just glaze over like the setting description.
Yeah.
I felt like I was kind of doing that in my first draft. And so I really had to like consciously think about like, what does it mean to actually build out atmosphere? I don't know, like what's your sort of approach to it? Because I feel like for me, it's just been a lot of like trial and error.
Yeah, I will say that like setting description has always been, okay, I really struggle to write things that aren't nature settings, if that makes sense. So
no, I feel you.
A lot of this book takes place in like a town and a castle. Like there's, I describe it as like opulent cottagecore, which like is,
oh my god,
it means
vibe?
Nothing, but
that's kind of a vibe.
It's there's still like, yeah, some nature, but for me, yeah, like, because I kind of zone out when I'm like not outside, I think. So I think it's very much like you have to consider your perspective and what you pay attention to, and sort of, yeah, like I'm always about like observing and drawing from real life. So for me, what helped was being more cognizant of my surroundings when I'm in those settings that I'm not as comfortable like describing on the page. Yeah, the sensory descriptions, like, yeah, utilizing all the senses or whatever senses are possible. Yeah, utilizing metaphor, but like more sparingly than I think people think, and with more passion. There's like, I know Ocean Vuong got like flack for this, which feels ridiculous, but did you ever see, he did, I think it might have been like an Instagram story or something, but it circulated, and he was basically talking about how he comes up with metaphors and how there was like a very specific, he did like an amazing like walkthrough of how he came up with this one metaphor. Because he's a poet, I tend to like listen more when poets like talk about that.
I do. When poets are talking, I'm like,
yes. Tell me more about metaphor and imagery, because of course a poet has to do that so much more efficiently than a novelist does. I was just talking with my roommate about this today, but yeah, when you're a poet and you're writing good poetry, you use less words than a novel will, so you really have to like be cognizant of your word choice and like what metaphors you pick. So obviously he's very good at that, and it translates into his like novel, or was it a novella, the book that he wrote, the prose book that he wrote.
I just feel like I'm always trying to make my descriptions like more efficient, you know, because I used to have this issue of like, I would take so long to get to the image that I wanted to create, right? When I think the mark of like a more practiced writer is like, how can you get to that striking image in the least amount of words? And I feel like right now I'm like in my era of just like trying to like mesh senses together. Yeah, I hope I didn't like overdo it in this scene.
The impact of it is good. It doesn't feel like, yeah, when a description goes on too long. My roommate and I were also talking about this today, where description can be punchy or it can be flowery. And like punchy, I think, is more what you're talking about with that effective, that impact, getting it out and like having a lasting impression, but with the fewest amount of words possible. And I think like you've accomplished that like a good amount of times here. And there is this sort of sense of like not quite maximalism in this excerpt, but teetering on it. But it's because it's overwhelming, and like that feels very much like it also pulls you right into it. So I think. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know if that was on purpose, but it's very effective.
Yeah, okay. That's the other thing I was going to ask, was just like, oh my God. Like, I was like nervous, like sending you this scene. Because I was like, I don't know. Because I think when you, especially when it's the first scene of the book, you read it so many times, right? And I wanted to kind of like paint this picture of like a very busy like cabaret that's like in hysteria. And it's this very opulent place, but also the person whose perspective we're in has like a certain contempt or disdain for it. But I didn't want her to like outright be like, ew, rich people. You know what I mean?
Now that you say it like that, is definitely, those are the emotions that this excerpt invoked. Fun, like it's enjoyable to read these descriptions. It's like watching like a master at work, honestly. Someone like really
girl,
like...
don't even don't.
No, I will.
Don't gas me. I don't deserve it. Let's go to the next
yes,
one.
You do.
So yeah, this is the part where like a woman, like an extravagantly dressed woman is like coming out of the cabaret, and she's sobbing, and there's like blood on her dress. You actually pointed out something that like I feel like I did unconsciously, but was kind of like my purpose with the line, was like the contrast of blood, glitz, grime, and like just kind of those like the meshing of those like images together. Her evident contempt is so fun for me. Oh my God, I'm glad. It makes me kind of like self-conscious a little bit of like, especially when I was writing like Anna as a character, because I was like, she isn't a strong female character, but she is kind of like stubborn. I worry a lot of the time about like how to balance showing off a character's more negative traits while still ensuring that a reader connects with them and like sympathizes with them.
There's a couple different ways. It sort of does depend on like the story, and I feel like a lot of it hinges on like things like, is the antagonist like worse? Like, are they rooting for this person because the relativity, force or person against is like
this is true.
I don't know. I mean, like personally, it also depends on reader taste. Like I really like tough female characters. I really, if they're like well-rounded and like depicted in an interesting way, I'm gonna forgive them for a lot, like way more than I'm gonna forgive a man. At a certain point, like to a certain degree, you can't really control how every reader is gonna like react to a character.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
definitely like showing well-roundedness and like why they are the way they are, maybe providing perspective and insight so that they feel like a person. Like
I think like one concern that I had with like writing Anna and why she was like so difficult was because like in the beginning I was like kind of forcing her to be like really mean and like, you know, a bit of a girl boss, but then it kind of didn't fit her character. And so I kind of like worry sometimes about can a female character just like, you know, she's like not strong, like she actually kind of like needs people in terms of like the physical fighting aspect of things, her trying to see like reason. She needs like other people to like literally rein her back.
No, that's a really interesting point. Like, yeah, because when we think about those tough characters, or female characters specifically, it's always like someone who can kick ass as well. But
yeah, like what if she can't though?
Yeah, no, but I think that's so interesting, because then it's like, so she has to overcome being like kind of a more sour person probably to like get the help she needs.
Yeah, like part of her arc is that she's very, very like talented like in this magical craft that she practices. And she's very smart, but she is naive about certain things about the world, and she kind of has to like confront that naivety.
It's fun to see her do her thing, and I'm definitely really interested to see like where you take this character and how you play out that arc, because that sounds really interesting to me personally. Like, I'd love to read that.
Okay, so then there's a line about the officer kind of just like moving her along. And I think Anna says something like smug up here. You're the one that's like accepting this bribe, bitch, you know? You said this little piece of character work is so charming to me. There's so much texture. I've never heard that.
Really? Okay, I use that word.
I love that
a lot.
Yeah,
it's just like little details that aren't super distracting, but good. I like it. I like texture.
I love that. Oh, love.
Yeah. That's why
I love that. Yes. This is like pretty much from the first draft. Like this like image is like one of the first parts of the draft that I labored over, like when I was writing it for the first time. It's really important that this character is like characterized in this first scene, and it's like it's not just her personality, but also kind of like a hint about the world and maybe social status and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's like a lot going on, but in a really good way, like a really interesting way.
This entire excerpt was stunning from start. Lynn, why is she lying?
Well, oh my god, how no, like seriously, I would not say things that I don't mean in critique.
Okay. This is exactly what the first few pages of anything ought to feel like. Oh my gosh. Instantly setting the scene and establishing the main character's key traits as well as her present goal. On top
so
of
many
that,
typos in this comment.
It's okay.
I got excited.
You've got such a well-developed style and voice. I'm genuinely upset that this isn't something I can pick up off the shelf tomorrow and take home. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna send you, girl, when I finish this draft.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, please.
You don't even have to annotate it. You can just have it. Like, yeah, okay. Like, this first scene has been through like more than a couple iterations. So, yeah, I don't know. It means a lot that you enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Like, I genuinely really enjoyed this. I kept being like, oh my god, this is good, to like random people. Not random people, but people like my roommate or like, you know.
Oh, I'm so glad. I guess this is like something that I forgot to ask you in your video, but like in terms of like what you want out of like a first scene, first chapter, what things like really stand out to you and make you be like, oh, this is like, that's a first chapter?
Yeah, I think for me, because I'm very much like focused on structure, not in a way that, you know, it takes away from how people want to structure things, but I'm very much like concerned about if the main character's goal or the perspective character's goal, like some goal has to be present. Like I have to know where we're going in the first like 5 pages or so.
Yeah.
And then setting up which you do here, which amazing, you do it so well. And then setting up the character's key traits and the setting and like some conflict, like as the more you can like show that is about to happen, if that makes sense, in the first couple pages, like the happier I am. Not in a crammed way, but just like being very efficient and effective about it. I think I'm always like super impressed, because I tend to read a lot of books that have slower starts. I write books, I feel like, that often have slower starts. So
I feel that too. Like I think that, I don't know, maybe this is something that like a lot of writers struggle with, but like in my first couple like manuscripts that I ever wrote, I would always start the story way before the action. As a writer, you're always thinking about like, oh, but then you need all of this context, and then you need all of this context and stuff. I don't know, is that like something that you feel you had to like train yourself to do, was to like start stories later? Because that's a piece of advice I hear from a lot of writers.
It definitely is. I've had that comment before on my writing where I didn't necessarily agree with it. I will give 2 examples of like how like situations in where I've had to think about this, because another thing I want to mention really quickly is there's like a popular piece of like writing advice that's start your story 15 minutes before the plot begins. I feel like that's a little arbitrary. In my young adult contemporary fantasy that I revised, so that is a story about a girl who goes on a road trip to bring her best friend back from the dead after he dies in an accident. People told me to start like at his funeral, and I said no, because I wanted to show his characterization while he was alive and their relationship while he was alive. So I had to start the story like before the first inciting incident happened.
Yeah,
that was really important to me, because otherwise, like, what is the point? Like, the core of the story is not this thing that happens, it's their relationship and like what drives her to do like all of these wild things for him. But then in the book that I'm writing now, I kept starting in the wrong place, and I think I might still be starting in the wrong place, and this would be in regards to like the first chapter, not the prologue that I shared a little bit earlier, because there's this investigation, like an informal investigation, because there's like a monster in the castle. It's Scooby-Doo. So there's like Scooby-Doo stuff going on when the story starts. But still am, like, I'll straight out admit it, I guess, I'm still struggling to figure out, like, what point I want that to begin at, or, like, where I introduce that concept. Because do you want to show, when it comes to something that's been going on for a little while, do I, like, want to show something a little earlier than the, like, inciting incident, the inciting disappearance or monster attack or whatever?
Yeah.
You know, it's definitely a tricky thing, and I think every story is like really different in this regard. You have to, like, for me, I'm definitely still figuring out what is important to me regarding the story and the characters, and I think that plays a lot into your starting point. So yeah, I think in general a lot of people can't afford to start later, but so much of it is subjective. It's so wild.
It is.
Yeah, wait, I think you asked me this question. What tips do you have to make descriptive writing more sensory? What sort of thought process do you go through to maximize the impact of a line?
It's hard because I just like go with my gut, which is like awful. But I think, it's like you have to be able to trust your gut though, and that takes like years. I think one thing that has really helped me, like really tangibly and really quickly, is thinking about my verbs. This line where it says the cabaret lights beamed into the black sky, I think I originally had something like the cabaret lights sighed into the sky. So I was really caught up on this idea of breath. I kind of start with like, what do I want this paragraph to feel like? I want it to feel like the lethargy of a summer, but also the excitement of a summer. How does the heat kind of like make you flushed, excited, but also like maybe dizzy? And then I start trying to mix sensations. Yeah, like, I mean, this is a pretty simple one, like calling like the golden lights sort of like warm and sweet as syrup.
That's so cool. That's so good.
But the thing is, like, yeah, like sometimes it works and sometimes you end up on a sentence that's just like flowery for no reason.
I feel like I need to get better at like the five senses, because I definitely rely very heavily on like color imagery, because it comes from my background. I used to like paint really. I was an art minor until I dropped out, but so yeah, like I feel like I tend to describe or lean very heavily on like visual imagery and like visual metaphor, and then when I do use metaphors, they tend to be of like nature things or animals.
Yeah.
It's just vibes based.
It is a lot of vibe though. No, I feel you. It's like so much vibe, and just like the way my fantasy reads is very different from the way like my sci-fi reads. I just finished writing like a sci-fi short story. I've been writing fantasy for like 2 years nonstop. And so it almost feels like sometimes you just need like a change of pace. Sometimes it's like when you're writing so much fantasy, you're in like a similar world, and then so all of your figurative language starts like meshing together. So once I took myself like out of a fantasy world and I was like in a completely different like sci-fi world, like I felt like my sentences were like getting fresher, and I was like, wait a minute, what's going on? Like, wait, there's no way.
That is so interesting. Yeah.
The other thing actually, like in terms of like how I felt like I improved my descriptions, I don't know, like 3 years or something, I was like very focused on writing literary fiction. Writing it for a long time, I think did help me think about my prose in a good way. Like it improved my prose, because so much about literary is like internal. It's very internally conflict driven. So much drama has to be extracted from observations or just a lot more like introspective things.
And I feel like I can see that influence in your prose, so that's really impressive. Honestly, I love it when things are a little bit more literary leaning, if that makes sense.
Me too.
Like, yeah, I love to see that in genre fiction.
Me too.
When prose is too dry, I'm a little bit like
right. Okay, I think enjoyable. There are writers who are like able to make like drier prose like really stand out, but in general, like I love when there's just like a little bit of flourish on there, you know?
Yeah,
like
just
flex a bit.
Extra.
If you
Some
can flex, yeah.
You have like a specific resource you use, or like, I don't know, something you turn to for that? Like
honestly, no, like thesaurus.com, she's my best friend. Like I'm literally like, I just can't write without thesaurus.com anymore.
Oh yeah, I was really interested to like learn. I feel like you've talked about it a little bit in your videos, but what would you say are some like key points or sources of inspiration for this project?
Ooh, for this one, like overall, it's obviously going to be, I think, parallels to anything that's like Monster Hunter-y. So like The Witcher.
Ooh, cool.
I think like, yeah, like, I don't know if you've like if you're familiar with like The Witcher in any capacity, but like
the game.
Yeah, like I've played Witcher 3, which I loved.
Yeah.
And I've read like one or two of the books.
Okay.
And so like I think tonally it's very different from The Witcher, obviously, because it's like completely different setting and time. Witcher is like medievally and it has a very like folktale-esque vibe to it. And then honestly, I don't know what my direct inspiration would be, but very like jazz agey type atmosphere, early to mid 20th century, and it's kind of inspired by very vaguely inspired by like the Philippines at that time, which was like being occupied / colonized by America. Like what really pushed me to write this book was that I've always loved jazz music. I kind of like started diving into jazz history. Filipino musicians were actually some of like the first musicians in Asia to like sort of learn jazz music. Yeah, they were like learning from like American soldiers. I think when you think of jazz age, or even just that atmosphere, that vibe, it's always rooted in like America. And I think there was just something exciting for me where I was just like, I want to write something that's jazz age, but like where the Filipinos at, you know? So, because like jazz has such a rich history in Asia. Like I think there's so many interesting like jazz age kind of like stories that you can tell in an Asian setting.
That's so cool. That is so exciting. I noticed you had like a little epigraph. I think that's the right term right at the start.
Oh
there.
Yeah.
And that's like, I just assumed it was like something you came up with.
Yeah. So it's supposed to be just, it's like in-world lore. It's not necessarily something that affects the immediate story, but it's just world building, and you kind of like put it there as like a salt to taste, you know, to make your world feel like rounded out. Like I wouldn't even call it like a full out mystery, but like, yeah, I think the word you use where it's just like, it's texture on the story.
Yeah, that's great. I really liked it. Like, I didn't leave a comment in the thing, but I was just like, wow, that's really sick. Okay, and then my last question is one that you asked me, but what would you say is your favorite line from this excerpt?
Oh, hang on, I haven't read it in a while. Okay. Like the one that you highlighted at the end, I think there's something I like about, I was kind of talking about it earlier, but like it's pretty simple. There's nothing like overtly flowery or like amazing about it, but I think it encompasses so much about like her as a character. And also like, yeah, it just kind of like hints about the world. Even though I didn't labor over it, like I think it's like a line that like serves its purpose.
I would definitely say that this is like a very strong example of like showing.
That is the end of the video. Thank you so much to Lynn for joining me today and reading the scene and providing all your like thoughts and comments on it. Check out the video that we did on her channel if you haven't already.
Yeah.
So
right,
yeah.
Thank you for having me.